Hello, everyone. I'm Emily, and once my mother became rich literally in an instant, but our family continued to live very poorly. Anyway, that is, I didn't get anything out of her becoming wealthy. Yes, it's possible this will all seem a little confusing to you, but I'll try to explain everything. I wasn't even 3 years old when my mother had to raise me on her own. My dad was the captain of a ship, and unfortunately, he left for a voyage and never came back. Mom never told me the details. She just said that Dad would never return. Up to that moment, my mother could afford to be a housewife since we were well off. My mother was then left to raise a child on her own and had to go to work. You understand how tough it is for her to find a job that pays well after spending her entire life at home. As a result, several years later, our finances took a serious hit. One day, my mother returned home with shopping bags stuffed with expensive things. I was taken aback and questioned where it all came from, but all she responded was that she had won an award at work. I opted not to question my mom about it because it all seemed unusual and implausible. You never know what miracles could happen. If someone doesn't want to tell the truth, that's their right. However, surprises like that one started happening all the time, about twice a month. My mother began to come home with a bunch of expensive purchases, and of course, I began to wait and hope that she would buy something for me. But it never happened. Then I said directly to my mom, "I want a new phone." She told me I didn't know the value of money and that she wasn't going to spoil me. As a result, my mother's spending on me didn't increase at all, but she clearly didn't skimp on herself. Buying pricey jewelry, high-quality clothes, and good shoes, I was very upset. Once I took my mother's expensive new ring to school to show it off to my friends. I wanted to show everyone that I wasn't poor like everyone thought, and that my mother and I were doing well. However, my mother immediately noticed the loss, and in the evening, a huge scandal awaited me. Mom said that no one should know about our wealth. She responded to my question by saying that jealous people could jinx us. It sounded absurd, especially because Mom was never superstitious in the first place. I began to get a lot of pretty terrifying thoughts in my head, and I wanted to figure out what was going on. So the following time she went to work, I began looking around the home for something to explain her actions and the source of her income. I had no idea what it could be, but my mother recently purchased a safe, which is due to be delivered to us, and I won't be able to find the truth once it arrives. As a result, there was only a little amount of time left. My mother's room was flipped inside out. Finding a note at the bottom of a box of Christmas ornaments took several hours. It was from my father's mother. That is, from my grandmother. She wrote that she was congratulating my mother on the addition to the family and sending us children's things as a gift. And I might have thought that it was about me as a newborn, but the letter was only written 6 months earlier. What did this even mean? What addition? What things did she know that Dad was gone? I planned to tell my grandmother everything, but because I didn't know the facts of my father's death, I went to the pier to learn everything I could about his absence. I was confident that some of the sailors knew who he was and what he had done. I went right there, but no one seemed interested in talking to me. I noticed the lone figure of an elderly man with only one leg. He reminded me of someone I knew. I had no idea how I knew him, but something told me that he would consent to speak with me, so I went up to him. As it turned out, the old man immediately knew me when he saw me. He was my father's assistant and visited me and my mother after my dad disappeared. So that's how I knew him. It turned out that I saw him at our house many times. I felt quite fortunate to come upon him. When I inquired about my father's final expedition, the old man consented to tell me everything. It turns out that their ship was trapped in a storm on that fateful day, and everyone on board survived except my father. They still have no idea what happened to him because his body was never discovered at the time. I had a wild idea. What if your father is still alive? I thanked the old guy for his candor and resolved to inform my grandmother. I had never heard of her before and had no idea what she looked like, but I decided to use her first and last name to search for her on social media. I only discovered one match and a completely empty account when I used that letter on Facebook. There was no one else in the world with that name. As a result, I resolved to write to her. "Hello, my name is Emily, and I think I am your granddaughter. Can we have a little chat?" The person on the other side of the screen read my message almost immediately, but didn't answer. I was extremely nervous and waited. I waited for 2 days, and only then did I receive an answer. She said that she would be waiting for me tomorrow at the old clock tower on the outskirts of the city. She also wrote not to tell anyone about it. This answer was stranger than anything else. If this was my grandmother, then why all the secrecy? And why couldn't she just answer my question? And what if this was just a complete stranger? After a little thought, I decided to go ahead and go to the meeting. After all, my curiosity was stronger than my fear. I arrived 5 minutes ahead of schedule. As I considered seeing my grandmother and really getting to know her, my pulse raced. I was pondering how I would inform her that my father had been absent for quite some time. I also wanted to inquire as to why she hadn't attempted to communicate with me previously. I was giddy with anticipation and began counting down the seconds. But no one appeared. After 15 minutes, I sensed someone approaching me from behind. When I turned around, I noticed a happy man holding a teddy bear. I was taken aback. All I could think of in response was Granny realizing how dumb she sounded. The man laughed and introduced himself as my father, who expressed his delight at seeing me. I began to frantically think back to the photographs of my father that we had at home and try to find similarities between the man and the photographs of this guy, and then goosebumps ran through my body. It was him, Dad. The surge of feelings overwhelmed me. I hugged him tightly and started to cry. I began to say that I missed him so much all these years, and that as a child, I waited for him every day. Dad was also touched by this meeting, but he said that we couldn't stay here for long and offered to take a walk along the riverbank. Then I found out that he was an orphan. I never had a grandmother that wrote an account. We're all his, and soon my dad told me why it was so necessary during their last voyage. He and the team found a treasure chest on a desert island and immediately took it with them, agreeing to divide the loot equally among all the crew members. However, a little later, Dad happened to overhear his crewmates talking about how they planned to throw Dad into the sea so that they wouldn't have to split the treasure with him. He was scared and decided he shouldn't hesitate. Dad left the ship with the chest in an inflatable boat on the same night and sailed to an uninhabited island, where he spent the following 2 years. He realized they were looking for him and that if they found him, he was done. So he moved to another mainland and lived there for a while. Because our family was under constant surveillance, it was impossible to reach my mother. However, Dad called Mom as soon as he could and then sent her that box, ostensibly on behalf of my grandmother, containing not children's items, but a large sum of money that Dad had salvaged from the sale of part of the jewelry, which is why my mother had to hide our wealth. Oh yes, and my parents were connected only through that Facebook account. And even there, they could exchange only encrypted phrases, imitating the communication between mother-in-law and daughter-in-law. When Dad told me the whole truth, our path was suddenly sharply blocked. It was that one-legged man who lied to me the day before, that my dad had disappeared from the ship during a storm, and next to him were more stern men. "Well, Jack, so we meet at last," said the old man. At that moment, Dad took my hand tightly and said that everything would be okay. In the next instant, a car stopped abruptly next to us, from the window of which my mother shouted for us to get in quickly. I had no idea that I could react so quickly, but in a matter of seconds, we were already inside the car. Mom said that we would never return home and that from this day forward, we would have a new life. She also said that before leaving for the meeting with my grandmother, "That is Dad. I forgot to sign out of my account on the computer, and she was able to read our messages. Otherwise, meeting with Dad's former crewmates would have hardly ended well for us." Well, that means I'm not fit to be a special agent. Soon we arrived at the airport and flew out in an hour. It doesn't matter. The important thing is that from that day on, we began a new life, and our family was reunited. Living with my dad turned out to be very interesting and cool. He is very funny, has a lot of interesting stories, and loves me and my mother very much. I hope that now our family will be happy, and nothing and no one can disturb this peace. And now we don't need to hide our wealth. I started at a private school dressed in nice clothes, had the coolest new tech, and even a purebred puppy. Sometimes I can't even believe that all this happened to me. Just like something out of a movie. Do you think my dad did the right thing by escaping the ship with the chest? Write your answers in the comments, like this video, and subscribe to our channel.
Hi, my name is Mabel, and I'm usually referred to as the child of the moon or an astronaut. And the reason is that I always wear this spacesuit, without which I simply cannot imagine my life. Now I will tell you how all of this is connected with each other. I was born a beautiful, sweet child, but within a few days after birth, pigmented spots began to appear on my skin, and this greatly worried my parents. As it turned out, it was not in vain because I was soon diagnosed with xeroderma pigmentosum. And by the time of establishing a diagnosis, about 50% of my skin was covered with spots. As it turned out, my skin is hyper-susceptible to ultraviolet light, and any exposure to sunlight on my skin leads to severe pigmentation. In fact, people with such a diagnosis are generally prohibited from leaving the house during the daytime, and even there, they need to hide behind the thick black curtains and not look out the windows at all. Actually, this is how most of my life passed. I didn't go to kindergarten, didn't go to school at all. I practically didn't know who any other child was and what they were interested in. And in general, what a normal life was. My entire existence was reduced to sitting in the four walls of my house from morning to evening, and only when the sun went down did I go outside. But at such time, I extremely rarely met other children, and in general looked at all the other people as if they were aliens. I had no idea how busy the city was during the day. No, I did have to appear in the sun during the daytime on the street about once every 2 months to see a doctor. But after each such walk, I acquired several new spots, and this sucks. My boring existence ended when I was 12, and my parents bought me a personal laptop, which I used to browse the internet. I saw a video on creating an animation clip, and I was so interested in the process that I wanted to learn it as soon as possible. The very next day, I signed up for courses and started studying at the Online School of Artists. After half a year, I was able to create my own cartoons, and the result made me very happy. This has become my hobby and life's work. At first, I created animated videos for myself, and then I started making money on it. That's when I was offered a job in a small creative team. I was immediately surprised by the atmosphere inside the team, and soon I had the first friends of my life. Yes, we worked together. And soon I had the first friends of my life. Yes, we worked together. Yes, we never met, but this did not prevent our friendship from being very strong and sincere. After a while, my friends and I started meeting in the evenings after sunset and going to cafes and cinemas together. I couldn't believe my luck because I finally started to socialize, and my social circle went beyond my family. One day, my friends all decided to go to the seaside together, and for obvious reasons, I had to stay at home. Yes, it was a little sad, but that's life. Anyway, they were only gone for 2 weeks, which is not that long. When they returned, we went to our favorite coffee shop on the first night they got back. One of my friends said they had great news for me, and they would tell me today. Honestly, I didn't know what to think. Did they bring me seashells from the seashore? Or did our team get a big order? What they wanted to tell me was this. During the vacation, one of my friends, Jack, suggested to the other guys in the group to give me a gift, and it was designed. One of my friends, Jack, suggested to the other guys to make me a gift to design a protective suit in which I could leave the house during the day. The design was ready in 2 days, and it became clear that the best option would be an astronaut suit with UV protection glasses. The guys made me an exclusive order at one of the factories, and that evening they handed me the best gift of my life, a spacesuit. At first, I was kind of scared, and I was tormented by doubts that it might not be too reliable, and that people in the crowd would laugh at me. But then I decided to try the next day. I went outside for the first time in the daytime, and it was so strange. I felt very conflicted inside. On the one hand, I was insanely happy to see the busy streets of the city. A lot of completely different people in the sun. But on the other hand, I was stuffy and scared. I was scared because I was confused. I've never been in such crowds. I've never seen so many cars. But maybe one just needs to get used to it in general. The pros, of course, outweigh the cons. I think that in my case, one can't complain about any inconvenience of the suit at all. It is worth saying that since then I have started a new life. I could leave the house at any time. I could hang out with my friends in the park and squares. But not for too long. And most importantly, I was able to attend school full time. I didn't even think I'd enjoy studying so much, but my excitement didn't last long. People looked at me very strangely, like an oddball, and even laughed at me. But I was ready for this from the very beginning, and therefore quickly got used to this nuance, and I didn't even think that one day the situation might get worse. One day, I was walking home after school, and on the way I saw several teenagers who surrounded me and asked me to let them try on my NASA suits. Their mood was clear, and it was expected that this meeting would not end well. But I couldn't take off my suit because it would be like death to me. When the teenagers began to aggressively tug on my spacesuit, I realized that the worst was inevitable, and invited them to go to the nearest store so that I could take off the suit and give it to them. But they no longer heard me and began to pull it off. It was clear that I could not hold it off for a long time, so I remained in the open sunlight while my offenders were having fun with the spacesuit. I ran headlong to the nearest building to hide from the sun. It was a supermarket, but I couldn't reach it because I stumbled and fell, breaking my leg. A woman ran up to me almost immediately and called an ambulance. In total, I spent about 10 minutes under the sun, and this time was critical for me because already in the hospital it became clear that about 90% of my body was covered in spots. "Oh, how?" I sobbed from such injustice. "Why tell me I've been on the edge of skin cancer all my life, but now I'm closer to it than ever?" Those teenagers had fun, played astronaut games, and probably made fun of me as an oddball, but none of them even thought about the consequences of their childish prank, if you can call it that. The police soon found them, but they were never seriously punished because of their age and good reputation in school. Since they ruined the old suit, their parents paid to make a new one for me, but no one ever apologized to me, and I could not give up the spacesuit and could not lock myself at home again. But since then, I have a new rule. Leave the house in the daytime only when accompanied by a parent or a friend. After all, this way, the risk of becoming a victim of hooligans becomes several times lower, and I feel very much confident when I am not alone in a public place. You know, I really love life, and I love this spacesuit because it allows me to go to school, communicate with friends, hang out with my company, and even roller skate. This is my life, and I dare not scold and take offense at all. Everyone has their own fate, and you need to be able to enjoy what you have. How long do you think you could live without sunlight and leave the house only after dark? You can share your responses in the comments below the video. Be sure to click on the thumbs up button and subscribe to our channel so that you don't miss the release of new interesting stories.